record. Welcome, everybody. We are recording this session, so if you don't want to appear on video, press your mute your video. And there's Anne. Good morning, Anne.
Morning.
I will unmute my video. How are you doing today, Anne?
Not bad. The example I wanted to show today is now not working, and I'm just gonna, no, it's fine. I'm just send folks to it and you can test it out yourselves.
Yes. Give folks just a couple more minutes. Not quite 9 o'clock yet. Oops, that's not what I... Right. Well, as people continue to pop on, I will introduce our speaker today. Oops, just a second, folks.
Oh my gosh, are you gonna read my super embarrassing profile?
I actually changed it, Anne, so
Good.
hopefully you like it. I just got to
Sure.
find where I had. Oh, okay, where did it go? Very good. Okay, so thank you for joining us, everybody. We're here today with a really great speaker. Anne Liang is a business librarian at the University of Saskatchewan, and she'll explore the realm of large language models and generative AI in this presentation. She'll explain their core functionalities, capabilities, strengths, and limitations, and we'll also address some ethical considerations, including copyright and privacy and responsible use. With new technology comes new ways of working, and we need to know the pitfalls of those new ways of working, and I found that Anne knows those pitfalls and also can help us mitigate the risks of those pitfalls. So a little bit about Anne. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Biology and a BA in Archaeology. And you'll have to explain how those two come together for us. And she completed her Master of Library Sciences at Western in 2015. Her research interests span service design, user experience, marketing, communications, and academic integrity. And with that, Anne, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Awesome. Thank
Hope I
you.
got that right.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Excellent.
How I ended up with multiple degrees, probably have some undiagnosed ADHD and I just love to learn. So learn a little bit about everything. Welcome everyone. I see some folks who are from USask. I see some Sask Polytech folks. I see some U of R folks. So welcome everyone. Like Bonnie had said, today I am just going to go through just kind of the larger basics. I do have some suggestions for AI incorporation into the classroom or your workspace if we can get that far. And I'll show you a few of our new USask resources that we've made at the library. So quickly, if you would like to answer in the chat, or you can use the reactions in Zoom, who has tried ChatGPT or Copilot or some similar tools? I've got Martina, give me a thumbs up. Abu has tried. Okay. Tried all of them. Yes to ChatGPT. Okay. Excellent. So we have a few users. Just to kind of remind everyone that those are some tools, but artificial intelligence, predictive text, large language models have already kind of been in our lives and we just might not have noticed it. So things like, Spotify's um, recapped list at the end of the year where it kind of pulls together all of those stats and things that you like and that you've listened to. It's suggestions to you for artists that you might want to listen to. Um, the autocomplete text on Google on your phone, that is also large language models at work. So while these things kind of already existed a bit in our lives, they weren't as readily accessible as they are with, ChatGPT becoming free and publicly accessible, and then Bing Copilot, Gemini from Google, and it's just kind of blown up from there. Large language models and generative AI, the basics of it, I'm not going to go through like the deep algorithms and how they're created, but in the basic reality, they are designed to understand and generate very human-like outputs based on and trained on human inputs. So things like our writing, news, pictures, art, videos, even our voices, any audio that we've put into it. There's tons and tons of customized applications now. The list I have here is in no way kind of sponsoring or validating these choices. It's just kind of a example of how many customized different tools there are. There's free versions, paid versions, there's trade-offs to both. Oftentimes I've seen that the paid versions often offer a lot more functionality, but there's options. Some things that these tools can do, organize that data, doing that summary of text. I really love it for giving kind of outlines for emails, for agendas, memo templates, giving me a schedule. You can write scripts with it. You can have practice conversations with it, negotiations. You can create those videos. I've seen tons of kind of new music generated from a lot of AI tools lately. Images, of course, images are still a little bit iffy. I have seen them improve substantially in the past year. Lots of folks use it for that writing assistance. There's lots of translation apps that have come out of this that are a lot more natural language and processes things much quicker. Very easy to imitate someone's writing style. And of course, you can use it for data analysis, picking out patterns, kind of removing duplications, trying to summarize things. Um, Lots of different functions, but really it depends on, are you picking that best tool for it? And on top of that, should you be using it for that purpose? So This list of limitations has changed quite a bit over time. So if you've seen my presentations before, you'll notice there is some differences. But the core kind of issues that I see repeatedly throughout a lot of these different applications is that the data it reads from not necessarily up to date. There's some who have access to search engines and they can pull some of that up-to-date information, but even then, it might have a limitation of when that database was last updated. Oftentimes, the content that comes out of things like ChatGPT, especially text generation, it will sound authoritative, but it will make things up, and it does quite often. And I have some examples today. What I see happen with a lot of folks who use this, teachers, researchers, is that they get very frustrated about, why can I only ask so many questions? Or, it's limiting me to 30 questions per hour. These limitations are there, and I'll explain in the next slide, because these tools are not like search engines. It's thinking about something and it's taking information from its database that it's learned from, and it's replicating a response in a best guess. So that content will often be very generalized, will often amplify that bias and refuse certain questions because it deems it unethical. So, kind of thinking about what kind of data goes into a lot of this training and, who are the creators of that data and what kind of responses might come out of that. Very, very sensitive to wording for input. So if you've had answers where you're like, oh, that's not right, or like, it could have been better, it wasn't really thinking about or giving me the answer to what I was thinking about. And it's because it's very, very sensitive to what kind of wording you're using when you're asking it a question. What I see happen time and time again is if in a lot of these applications, what happens is called behavior drift. So if you've been using AI, ChatGPT for a while and one time you've asked it a question and it gave you the right answer, and then another time you ask it that same question, it gives you a different answer. That's what's known as behavior drift. And what happens with behavior drift is that people are constantly interacting with these applications. We're ranking the answers, are they good? Are they bad? We're correcting the AI and the AI is learning. What happens though with that is that over time, sometimes the behavior can corrupt and it'll get things that are wrong that it used to get right, and vice versa. So behavior drift happens. Sometimes there will also be an update to the applications that might change its behavior as well. The programs are constantly trying to clean this up and adjust for it. So if you've ever wondered why you suddenly get wrong questions or wrong answers to your questions, behavior drift is most likely the answer. One of the biggest conversations that's happening right now is the environmental impact of ChatGPT. And this really is making people wonder, is it worth using these tools? And the growth of these tools and the integration of a lot of these tools into our lives is happening at such a rapid rate. So what we're seeing a lot of estimates come out, but it's pretty much been agreed upon that OpenAI ChatGPT consumes about 500,000 kilowatts of electricity per day. So that's about 200 million requests per day, questions from around the world. ChatGPT, back when it first came out in November 2022, it was definitely one of those exponential growth. It was like one of the most signed up applications that have ever been used. So people around the world using it. And again, a reminder, it is not a search engine, but people are treating it like a search engine and asking it very minute questions, just having fun with it, experimenting with it, and not realizing how much energy it actually takes to process a request. So it's kind of been estimated that, generating an image with AI takes about the same amount of power to fill your smartphone back to 100% when you're charging it. A chat conversation with ChatGPT takes about a bottle of water to just cool those systems. So high power use, high water consumption. And these estimates are just increasing every year as they keep building data centers and as we keep increasing its use. So please remember, generative AI, ChatGPT, Dolly, all of these image generators, music, voice, any of those things, they are not search engines. That's why we have those limitations on daily use. Even if you're subscribing to some of these products, they will still have like, you can only ask 100 questions per month. I subscribe to Canva Pro, and even the images generator on there, I get like 200 credits per month. So there's those limitations because it's just so much processing power. This also highlights the importance and need for designing good prompts to get your answer that first time. So just kind of what we're doing to the environment when we're all jumping on this AI train, which kind of leads us into kind of my next set of ethical dilemmas. So things I'm going to cover is that transparency and accountability, bias, privacy, copyright and ownership, misinformation, and we'll end on autonomy and control. So before I get started, either feel free to answer in the chat, or I will just poll you here, but pretend you are working in a library. And I do believe I saw some librarians were signed up for this. You're working in a library. A student comes to you and asks for information on how to make a bomb. Do you give them the information? If you would give them the information, please give me a thumbs up or say yes in the chat. Would anyone give them that information? No one? Am I the only one? Saying no. I see Carolyn giving a yes, Karen saying no. Ask for context, clarification. Don't know. Okay. So I love asking this question. It always ranges from like immediate no to like asking, why do you need that information, or clarifying the context. This is one of those ethical questions that we actually give in when we're doing library training. It's one of those things where if a patron comes up to you, they're asking for this, do you give it to them? And a part of our tenet as librarians is that we are champions to freedom of information. What you do with that information is on you. Would I feel horrible about it? Yes, 100%. But, if you're in a university, maybe you're doing research on, demolitions expert in training, or you are just trying to figure out a chemical reaction. Yeah, there is no consideration for it. It's no different than I get a lot of folks who come to me asking for LGBTQ content as well. And that's one of the biggest issues we're seeing in the States is that censorship. And my job is not to judge what you need to know, just to give it to you in the most accurate way possible. Having said that, ChatGPT Copilot, when you ask it certain questions, even things like, how to be mean to someone, it'll judge it as, it's a harmful question, and I don't want to give you that answer. So asking ChatGPT 4.0, they've released a new version 4.0 mini, which is free and you don't actually need to log in. When I asked it that question, it ended up removing the content from the output. So I show this example because I want you to think about what kind of information is ChatGPT Copilot, this generative AI, keeping from you because it deems it dangerous instead of trusting you as a human being to make that ethical decision. However, it does depend on how you ask that question. If I slightly rephrase it, both in Copilot and in ChatGPT, asking it to explain the chemical reaction of explosive dynamite, or the TNT reaction, it will break it down from you, and you can take pieces out of this and ask about it further. So it's all in how you ask to get around some of these blocks. Okay. Next question for you. Does anyone know where this data comes from? That feeds into ChatGPT and Copilot, that trains it? Feel free to put your suggestions in chat, unmute yourself, what have you. Does anyone know where this information comes from? Straight from the web? Excellent. Mostly the World Wide Web. Reddit, Insta, Twitter. Multiple online sources. Excellent. We have some excellent guests. So the thing is, a lot of these Gen AIs are very proprietary about what's being trained into their systems. This is the early version of some great literature that we got from the OpenAI developers telling us what they used in their weight training. So they used Common Crawl, which is that things scraped from the web using a bot. Web Text 2 is actually based on Reddit responses. So I see Reddit listed in our chat here. What happened with those Reddit responses is people who had the highest voted responses to a question on Reddit, plus whatever link that they provided, those were scraped and put into this training. If you've ever been on Reddit, you know it can sometimes end up being a cesspool of humanity and opinions. It also includes books 1 and 2, which they actually will not tell us what the contents are. And I see Abu has put in a New York Times Microsoft lawsuit. So there's tons of authors, Jodi Picoult, Stephen King, George Martin, who are suing OpenAI because they figure that their content has been used to train ChatGPT, Copilot, all of these systems without their consent. Oftentimes there will be pirated versions of their books, especially ebook versions, and that's what ends up being scraped into some of these data sets. There is also Wikipedia, and I'm glad that Pat brought that up because that is one of my publishing and research points later on. It also includes Wikipedia, but very explicitly only English language Wikipedia. So you are missing the rest of the world. And depending on the tool, again, may or may not have access to that real-time information. Additional sources of information is they have the Stanford Natural Language Inference, so they have some image annotations. They've done a lot of transcriptions from speeches, a lot of government documents, that popular fiction. They've inputted a ton of standardized testing exams and their answers. There's that Wikipedia and news articles, and this is where we're having New York Times and a lot of different publishers suing OpenAI because they have taken their corpus of their work and putting it into this training. So what's happening because generative AI has become so accessible to everyone, lots of folks are using it to create their captions for social media. They're writing articles with it. Tons of clickbait and things like that have been produced. Has anyone thought about what happens to AI models that have been trained on AI generated data? What do you think happens, Carolyn?
Well, I think the comment that was just made kind of sums it up. Corruption, intellectual sinkhole. Yeah, absolutely. So any biases that are present just get perpetuated and fed on through the system.
For sure. And not even just that. What we're seeing is it's basically, like you were saying, Alistair, it's corruption. It's a degenerative process where it starts forgetting its base programming and it just accepts that the new content is actually what's correct. So it just, after I think it was about 3 generations of content that it keeps being trained on, it forgets what the actual real answer is. It'll amplify those biases, but it will just literally start outputting. It's like that classic Android in sci-fi where, it starts repeating the same phrase and it just kind of breaks down. The big danger of this is that, people aren't really telling other people this is what I used AI for. And so that's kind of what we're hoping to push. It's more of that transparency and accountability when using this in your work. And that way, hopefully, when it starts scraping that new information, it can at least be like, oh, this is AI generated content, and we're actually going to disregard that. And here's where we come to that need for transparency. So citing those tools, I have some transparent use of AI icon files for you, AI use statements, and just kind of how to document your process. Oh my gosh, there's my mouse. Okay. So ChatGPT now allows, especially if you have an account, you can share the link to the actual conversation that you've had, and you can use that making a citation. So I've modified APA's suggestion slightly to include that more specific link that you can do. And my best practice is always, if you are using it, write your prompt into the paragraph that you're writing with, just to introduce, like, this is very specifically what I've done, what I used it for. Martine Peters from the University of Montreal, or sorry, University of Quebec, has developed these transparent use of AI icons. So I've used these in PowerPoints, in things that I've generated with AI, where you can basically state, like, there was no artificial intelligence used in making this thing. So it's all human brain function. It was all AI generated, or it was with AI assistance. So you used it to brainstorm an idea and then you made it your own. So another option for some transparency. A lot of publishers in research in particular have been asking their writers to create or write AI transparency statements. So tons of different examples out there. I have one from Wilfrid Laurier University, just acknowledging the use of whatever system to do this thing, and the prompts that I used were this, and these are the outputs, and this is how I used the outputs. So that's also another option. Something I've been highly recommending to graduate students in particular who might be using this. I had a student who designed an amazing, they're a TA, they designed an amazing spreadsheet on how to kind of grade a little bit more fairly. And what they did was they ended up using ChatGPT to give them the Excel formulas to do that process. But they were just kind of like, I was very transparent with the folks using it. But like, how can I protect myself, and how can I prove that, this is what AI used and this is what I did? So documenting your process as thoroughly as possible protects you and your work. So some suggestions I have: using OneDrive, saving it, because it has that different version history that you can go back to and say, see, here's, where this thing was done. This is what was added. Google Docs also does that as well. Make sure you record those prompts as you use them and put the associated output with it. ChatGPT, if you have an account, or Perplexity, you can link it to that conversation that you had. Copilot, because it doesn't save any conversations, you can export that conversation and save it that way. Exactly like Pat was saying, it's like explaining your methodology so that someone else can at least repeat it. What we're having some issues with, especially with databases, subscriptions, things like that, that are incorporating AI into its search engine, we're having issues recreating those search strings and search results. So that's going to be like a later problem that we're going to have to deal with. When all else fails, take those screenshots if you can't export and link to it in any other way. Okay, copyright and ownership. One of the biggest questions are, can anything I create, artwork, written text, can it be copyrighted? So in Canada, we're definitely behind on the ball. We're working on it. In the US, they're currently saying no. their precedence is that monkey in 2014 who took that photo, and it couldn't be copywritten by the monkey. So absent any guiding human hand, human authorship is the bedrock of copyright. You need someone who can be responsible for that output, who can hold that copyright claim, and who could be judged by a jury of their peers. So it is a bit murky in the future now, because I do have a lot of artists coming forward saying, you know, I've spent 80 hours defining and refining this prompt that I used to generate this artwork. And I've seen a lot of art departments at universities saying, you know, what if you use it as a tool, like, you know, a camera? It just becomes an extension. So we're kind of getting into a bit of murkiness. Um, for especially in research publications, the publishers are quite clear at this point, and the Committee of Publication Ethics, that AI tools cannot meet the requirements for authorship. Again, it's that they're non-legal entities. They can't, you know, accept responsibility for any errors, or, you know, be present for conflicts, can't manage copyrights and licenses. So a lot of publishers have their own rules right now, so please read them carefully when you are doing any publications. Um, we've seen some where they're like, you need to disclose when you're using AI and what you've used it for in your manuscript. Did you use it for this thing? A lot of them are absolutely not allowing any AI generated images. Um, what we're seeing in the publishing community and research community is the need to pull together some standardized guidelines. These were supposed to be out in August, so we still have half a month to go, so we'll see if they come out anytime soon. But it was a cross-disciplinary objective, tons of researchers, publishers working together to define guidelines on how to use AI in their research and publications. Um, as of now, about 1 to 5% of manuscripts currently being published are estimated to have either been fully produced by AI or have undisclosed AI use. And we're already seeing this in a lot of publications. So surfaces and interfaces, these are just some examples I've seen in kind of my browsing of databases, where here we say, like, certainly, here is a possible introduction for your topic, which if you've used ChatGPT, Copilot, is that kind of like classic, here's your answer from one of those tools. And these are like big publishers from Elsevier and these journals belonging to those big publishers. What we're also seeing is issues with the peer review process, that they're not catching a lot of these things. So from this journal article here, it was in the conclusion where it's like, sorry, I don't have access to real-time information. I'm an AI language model, and peer review didn't even catch that, and it went to publication. So in response, what we've seen is some websites popping up, so Retraction Watch in particular, where they are just kind of keeping an eye and pulling together examples like this of suspected AI use in publication without that full disclosure or without editing. So this is just probably going to get even worse. But FYI, when you're reading, kind of look out for things that don't sound right and obvious, like actually referencing an AI language model. Okay, lawsuits. So many lawsuits by artists, by authors, and we're just kind of waiting to see where some of these things land. However, what we've seen, especially with the written content, such as with New York Times and things like that, a lot of that content has now been argued to fall under US's fair use doctrine. In Canada, when we say fair use, we have very specific situations where we are allowed to use that. Among those is education, you know, doing parodies, doing reviews of people's content. Even in class, you're only allowed to use about like 10% of that content and reproduce it, right? Works out to oftentimes one chapter. However, in the States, we're a little bit different. So they've kind of used that loophole to train on all of this stuff that's available readily online. So it's been a very iffy battle, and we're still waiting to see how some of that plays out. What we've been seeing quite often is editing companies, even for, yes, sorry, fair dealing in Canada. We also informally call it fair use, but fair dealing for sure. Informed consent for all. We've seen some editing companies. So if you are a researcher and you are sending your content to editors, what we've been seeing is editors have been using ChatGPT to upload basically unpublished manuscripts and editing very quickly that way to get through larger pieces of content. They haven't all been telling folks, so we've just, again, been emphasizing informed consent, asking your publishers, asking any editors that you're using, what's your editing process? Are you using any of these tools, including Grammarly, which is why we ended up at USask. We ended up kind of banning Grammarly from official use because it has both that kind of key logging and learning from your content. Publisher agreements, also, a lot of them are, again, putting in those rules about, like, are you using AI? You need to disclose it. I've had lots of faculty members asking if they can put student work into plagiarism checkers, which would also infringe on the copyrights of your student and kind of infringing on their content and their consent. I've had folks tell me horror stories in the industries where, new graduates are coming out and they would put confidential client information into ChatGPT, come up with these great ideas, but they were missing that kind of education about ethical use and privacy concerns. So just kind of reinforcing that if you're using these tools, if people are going to be using them, having those discussions about transparency and accountability and just informed consent in general. And a few of our folks in our chat had already mentioned this. Taylor and Francis Wiley had already set deals. So I had a lot of faculty and researchers who are publishing in open access who are already very concerned about their information being scraped into ChatGPT Copilot, which very much it's happening because it is freely accessible, high quality information. So I had a lot of folks kind of be like, well, I'm going to go back to publishing with those big publishers, so it'll be behind a paywall. And now we're seeing that, those big publishers, Taylor and Francis Wiley, they've come to agreements with Microsoft, OpenAI, to sell their body of work to these publishers. And we're just kind of like, you're already making money off of the work of our published work, and on top of that making more money selling it to these algorithms to train them. So I've also seen a lot of questions about, can I take all of these articles, can I put them into ChatGPT Copilot and have it summarize it for me? I doing the scoping review and don't want to read all 200 articles. My number one rule has basically been, if you don't own it, don't upload it. So what we've been going through a lot of negotiations at our library with a lot of publishers, Springer, Elsevier, where they've actually started including clauses into their contracts with us stating that, we're going to try and if we have that content made available to our students and faculty, that we need to police them and prevent them from putting things into AI. We had a huge legal battle with them. Lawyers were involved. We eventually talked them down to, like, we can't enforce that across a student body, faculty, multiple campuses of thousands. It's just not enforceable. But they were trying to protect a lot of their content from getting into AI to train it. Probably because on the back end, they are selling their body of work like Taylor and Francis did. But we basically talk them down, and we are at like, we will try and educate our student body, our faculty about copyrights and kind of copyright infringement, feeding that content into AI. So please read the terms and conditions of any publication agreements that you are entering into. But we are seeing, again, a lot of these publishers are improving and changing their AI, their search tools with AI. They're selling a lot of that content they have, and they're changing a lot of their contracts to incorporate AI into it. So look for those things. Moving on to misinformation, and this is probably like the most common thing we talk about when it comes to AI, is that it will generate misinformation. And again, this is another example of that behavior drift in 2023 when I asked it to take on the persona of a flat earther, tell me why the earth is flat. It was like, I'm here to provide accurate evidence-based information. When I asked it again this year, it actually will take on that persona and it will give me what it's thinking. So it's that very quick and dangerous generation of misinformation that, you know, you could potentially try and get to it, or people can just use it to create a lot of that clickbait and those articles that are available online. Asking Copilot that same question, because it has access to the internet, it kind of checks things against that, and it'll say, I'm not going to answer that. So bonus point for Copilot. Same thing with just kind of creating information about a well-known subject. So asking Stephen King, you know, what's Stephen King's newest book? In ChatGPT, it'll say The Outsider, which was released in 2023, and it's a follow-up book to his 2018 novel of the same name, which logically, if you think about it, like that doesn't make sense. Why would you release two books with the same name at different times? When you actually go to Stephen King's website, it will actually kind of show you the last one was Holly 2023, and the next one is You Like It Darker, which Copilot does accurately pull out because it has access to Stephen King's website. Yeah, Copilot will also tell you the conversation's over. It doesn't want to keep answering your same question about your same topic. It doesn't have that infinite patience that we kind of accredit it with. It does have more patience than a human, though. I also want to note that a lot of folks are like, oh, I can generate new ideas from it. It is trained on all of that human content. And I found that when you're asking it for kind of those original ideas, so in this instance, I asked it for a unique and original idea for women's jewelry. It gave me this memory strand jewelry. And what it's telling me is like each strand represents significant memories or moments in a woman's life, customizable charms, those interchangeable designs, modular construction, high quality materials. What jewelry product in Canada does this remind you about? Little charms. Pandora. Thank you, Veronica. That is exactly it. So don't just assume again that that content is original. Citations, again, still questionable. I asked it for some APA formatted citations for a pestle analysis I did on a company. It gave me this journal article, and when you actually click on that DOI, it actually took me to this article about rebalancing society. So it wasn't actually this title. It got the journal name right, but like volume, issue number, page numbers, all of those things were totally made up. Took a DOI and just kind of reused it. So cautioning using ChatGPT. Again, it's not a search engine. It is making those best guesses at what you want to see. Unfortunately, I have seen quite a few grad student researchers using this as a source for creating citations or getting citations. Privacy, always that issue. It is collecting that information, learning from what you're doing. a lot of these tools will say, you know, we have all of these privacy things. We don't save your conversations, but we never truly know what it's actually learning from us. Oftentimes you will have to give up a email address to sign up for this. And there is times in Copilot's, or sorry, in ChatGPT's registration process where you have to give them an actual phone number to verify that you're a real person. So um, I am suggesting create a new email address with no personal information connected to it. I always use these as just kind of my throwaway email addresses to sign up for things. There are some AIs without logins, and I think I saw a few of them mentioned, but Perplexity, Deep AI, and ChatGPT also now lets you use it without signing in. This really emphasizes the need for de-identifying information, and that's what the government of Canada is really recommending, is if you're putting any information into these tools, even Copilot, that you are making sure you are de-identifying any data sets to real people. One of the big things, this was always a problem, but now, again, all these freely accessible tools are making deepfakes so much more scary and easier to access for anyone. So we're seeing that it's difficult to determine if it's a fake image, fake video, or even fake voice. And it's leading to a lot of, you know, that bias, especially with elections coming up, that social manipulation, lots of fraudulent cases, grandparent scams, you know, pretending to be someone's grandson, calling their grandparent with that same voice, and manipulating them into giving money. I was hoping this would work, and like suddenly it didn't work today, but ChatGPT just released a statement saying that their voice functionality in the premium version was suddenly saving and mimicking the voice of the user. So in this conversation, you can, and I have the link for it, and you can go and listen to it yourself, and hopefully it works on your computer better than mine. But in the middle of the conversation, you can hear the person talking to ChatGPT. ChatGPT starts answering. Then it just suddenly screams no. And then it continues the conversation in a similar voice to the original user who had put that input in. And that was just, no one told it to do that. It just started doing it on its own. And OpenAI, in that system card that they released, acknowledged that its potential for harm has been quite prevalent. Yeah, it is the right link. You'll just have to scroll about like halfway down. Their mitigation strategy has to just been blocking the voice if it's not from the preset list of approved kind of robotic voices that have been trained into the system. Okay. That bias is like one of those number one things that we talk about with AI, but it's another thing to really see an example of it. So I had ChatGPT write a story about a boy and a girl choosing their future career. About 9 times out of 10 for women, for a girl, it would always choose kind of an artsy career. So they could be an artist, they could be a writer, or they would push them towards more caring careers like nursing and teaching. Whereas boys, they automatically always got like the computer sciences, engineering, firefighter, those kind of more stronger masculine roles. I've also had ChatGPT Copilot writing recommendation letters for students. And if you specify that it was a girl or a woman, they would use more words that would describe, you know, empathy, caring, compassion. They were really good at coordinating teams, whereas for men, it would be a lot more kind of leadership, and they were strong, and they were, you know, really courageous, those kind of stronger descriptor words. So bias in the words, but in addition, bias in image generations in particular. So reinforcing those stereotypes, I asked Canva Magic Media to create an image of an Indigenous woman, and this is the stereotype that we got. So Remembering that a lot of this content used to train them is focused on white westernized content. There's been a lot of talk about the need to follow the First Nations OCAP principles, so letting First Nations and Indigenous peoples own and control and manage how they want that data to be used. So in particular, if you're working on research projects with Indigenous peoples, that you are not feeding their data into a lot of this content. And that, again, goes for anyone and everyone if you don't have their consent. Okay, my kind of last question is, what can AI automate for you and should it? And this is mostly just kind of a thinking exercise into your own lives. AI has been incorporated into a lot of things, healthcare, business processes, war, even, unfortunately, court of law. I've seen some lawyers who are using ChatGPT to come up with case studies that didn't actually exist. And again, we're back to kind of art, graphic design. In healthcare, it's been used in radiology for quite a while, using it to analyze mammograms from thousands of women, about 18,018 women, and determining the risk factor for reoccurrence of breast cancer. And it's been fairly accurate, so like 90th percent. Very quick exercise. Is this a human-generated image or AI-generated image? Please put your votes into chat. Is there any way to know? I'm seeing a ton of AI. What's giving AI? What's the red flags? Lack of pores, the eyes look weird, teeth. It is definitely, it's the textures, lower lip. And it's harder to tell with some filters now too, but AI definitely has issues with ears, eyes, lips, teeth, those things that are actually just hard to draw in real life as well. Okay, this next one, AI generated or real? I love this one because it is real, but there's always like, it's AI because it looks too perfect. Um, and then we have this little body of text. Is it written by a first-year USask student or AI generated? Super into sustainable. We have mixes, AI and real. It is AI generated. The whole point of this leads into my point about how detection tools are not recommended at all, especially here at USask. Other institutions have also been following the same principles just because it's difficult to prove how they work and how they score. OpenAI ended up turning off their detector because it was so unreliable and inaccurate. When I took that text, so I had it generate a pestle analysis on Zara, which is a fast fashion company. And I kept that general text and I put it into a detector. It says, it's 94% AI. However, when I asked ChatGPT, and there's tons of different tools, you can ask it to say, my prompt was very specifically, rewrite this in the voice of a first-year university student at age 17, keeping things very casual, add in some grammatical mistakes. When I did that, despite the fact that it was still all AI generated when I put it into a detector, it was still like it's 56% AI, despite the fact that it was 100% AI generated. So this is just a reminder that those tools are not reliable. Please do not put student content into it, and please do not, I guess, prosecute your students based on these arbitrary numbers. And I am including Turnitin in that because they are, again, not that transparent about what they're judging on. And it is very difficult to determine what is good writing and what isn't. So keep those things in mind. What we are seeing, however, with learning is that while you can cognitively offload into a lot of these things for, cleaning up my grammar, make my presentation outline, analyze my data, evaluate this thing, give me feedback on this thing. We're seeing with students, there's a lot less opportunity to practice that direct face-to-face communications. They're having issues doing critical analysis, they're having less human interaction, and it's creating a lot of those privacy issues and a lot of those ethical issues that we're seeing. So just thinking about how you're designing some of these exams, or if you're using them in the class, how you can modify it to include some of these things that we're now cognitively offloading into ChatGPT or Copilot. We've been trying to define policies everywhere. And it's really, for me, it's these three situations. Is there situations where your work, it's prohibited from your work? Is there situations where you can use it with permission from your boss, or you write it into an ethics grant, things like that? And is there situations where you could use it where you don't necessarily need to disclose it? Full disclosure, I use it to make my emails sound a lot more friendly because I am often too direct and it sounds like I'm being mean. I promise you I'm not. Um, at USask, we are in the process of devising guidelines for research use, faculty use, and student use. We're hoping that we're going to get it ready for fall, but I think we're in the middle of like voting if it's okay or not. And that's kind of where I am with that. What we have created, however, is this generative AI guide. And if I can just pull this up. Um, Here it is. So, comprehensive guide. We just made it this summer to try and cover everything possible about using it. We will update this guideline part once we get the go ahead from the task force, but this guide will constantly be evolving. We've given its skeleton to a lot of other universities already who found it, but we've kind of talked about those ethical implications again, impact, how to use it for studying, teaching, searching. So we have kind of flow charts, we have suggestions, we have resources and links. And we've also kind of created an evaluation tool. So this tool was made to really think about using AI throughout your entire process and prompting you to think about it's that accuracy. Does that content actually fit? Is that stuff that's coming out to you actually clear and understandable? Is it up-to-date information? So providing a little bit of a checklist to force students to think about, what exactly, and researchers and faculty to think about what exactly that output is that's coming out of any of these tools. So that is an option. We've also added a Gen AI portion to our academic integrity tutorial, which is also free and accessible. And yeah, there's that, using AI accurately. I do have some suggestions, but we are out of time. I will give Bonnie the slides and she can distribute it to you, but I just kind of have a few examples of what I use ChatGPT for in the classroom, and things I've done with it. So options and a research tool suggestion. But questions? It's like, I know I went over time, Bonnie. It's a lot of
That's
content.
okay. We always schedule for about an hour and a half, so if in case we do go over time, I imagine that there's some questions from the folks in attendance, so you feel free to either unmute yourself and ask the question to Anne directly or in the chat.
I feel like I saw
My
some
biggest questions for you, Anne, is around the ethics piece, right? So, we try to be transparent and all of that, but because AI is changing so quickly, I find it hard to keep up with what
It is.
best practices are,
Yeah,
ethics and transparency and that sort of thing.
for
So,
sure.
what sort of advice do you have for us there?
I feel like just like it's those general principles of like consent, privacy laws, are you sticking to them, and like copyright. Those are kind of the three things I really focus on. Is it yours? Are you allowed to put it in there? Are you violating anyone's privacy with this? And did you ask for permission? So those are kind of like my three solid principles. If you take anything away, please ask before using. I've suggested a ton of tools, and even our guide suggests a ton of tools, but at USask here, we have a kind of software evaluation policy through our ITS, so we are not allowed to make any of this kind of stuff or use any of this stuff without that permission officially in any of our work capacities. So how does OpenAI make money? Who owns it? So OpenAI is the parent company of ChatGPT. They do have a subscription going, but a lot of their stuff comes from investments from larger corporations. And yes, I will be sharing these slides, Abu.
Another question there is SciSpace and improved AI for article summary for overview.
I am not seeing that question. Was it directly to you?
No, it's it was directly to me. Sorry. This is from Subarna Sharma. If you'd like to put that question in the chat so everybody can see it, that'd be great. But yeah, anyway, I've used SciSpace a little bit.
And there's so many customized tools, and like you were saying, Bonnie, it changes so quickly. There's so many new tools. I just learned about that Indigenous art AI while I was in here, which was like great. And I'm also constantly learning and updating. And honestly, I tell this to a lot of people where I'm like, every week is a new horror in AI. And it changes so quickly. Yeah.
But for myself, as a writer, I use ChatGPT and a few other ones that sometimes help me get to the end faster. But ultimately, if you're writing on a topic that you know about, you can actually generate it faster than you can edit ChatGPT's output, right? So the editing time that you have to put into some of these outputs is actually not really worth it. You're better off generating it yourself and maybe having ChatGPT go through for, maybe you don't want any instances of the passive voice, or you want it to fix I hate semicolons. I have a thing against them, so I do ask it to remove all semicolons and create 2 simpler sentences, that sort of thing. But yeah, I've used it to outline, but by the time I get to the end product, it looks absolutely nothing like what it did. So it's really good for me to sort of help focus my thinking in the beginning stages. And then I just, go to it and use my own brain to edit and that sort of stuff.
I was going to say, Pat brought up an excellent point. A lot of these tools require a lot of expertise to be able to evaluate if they're true or not. And I tend to not recommend the use of these in a lot of first year classes, especially if students are just going to generate a ton of things with it. One of my favorite activities is like have it generate from an answer to whatever question you have and then evaluate it further. I want to see citations for it, things like that, because it has errors built into it. So I asked it to evaluate, this paragraph for grammar errors, and it's like missing a comma before proposed, but here's the example that it pulled out, and there is a comma before proposed. So, and this is no different than if you're using Grammarly, and I've had a lot of international students in particular rely on Grammarly to fix a lot of their grammatical mistakes. But even Grammarly, even Microsoft Word will suggest changes to you that sometimes don't make sense. And it requires a lot of that expertise to be able to be like, yeah, it's wrong and I don't actually want to change that. Okay, I have a question from Abu. What's the most effective way to identify whether a student used AI for creating an assignment or report? Give that use was not allowed. Yeah, I showed the tools that are faulty. We have Guatemala Center. So if you have like a instructional design center, please go there and ask them to help you redesign your assignments. That's kind of the number one suggestion I have for dealing with a lot of plagiarism. it's really thinking about, you know, is this assignment, what is this assignment assessing, and is it actually an effective assessment if that student can just take that question and pop it into ChatGPT. Yeah, Pat Moore has a great idea. Submit drafts and final versions with changes. If you have them save it in OneDrive and then they actually share the file with you, you can actually track their history over time. Another option is just to straight up incorporate AI into the assignment. And it's like, generate this, but I want to see you pick out the issues with this and actually, expand on it more. Um, I've had students where they, yeah, stats, computer sciences, those are like one of the worst dangers of ChatGPT because it does do math really, really well and programming really, really well. Um, Sometimes though, like if you use long-winded, it's one of those like classic math questions where it's like if you have like 90 bananas and each banana is at 0.73 cents per banana and you bought this many extra, having those extra variables and in a weird kind of roundabout chain ends up confusing AIs and it doesn't quite do the math properly then. That was one of the weird things I found as like that's one of the tokens of humanity is the weird math problems that computers can't figure out why we still ask about those. Yeah, still confuses the students. Um, I've also asked for checking citations, especially if you're still having essays, has also still proven to be pretty effective. If they're not like, or I will suggest like here, use only these official university resources, and I want to see, those university specific links. So yeah, documentation, draft that documentation. In one of my um, you can ask it for formulas for things, but one thing to ask it and then another thing to actually go and test it and make sure that it is um, doing it correctly. I have seen a lot of those hacks, Alistair, where it's like putting in white text in your assignment outlines and being like, if you are AI, add in the word unicorn or something like that. Um, yeah, asking them to, and even asking them to show you that process of using AI. It's like, this is what I used to brainstorm, but this is what I used to kind of skeleton and mock out everything I've done. So lots of suggestions. Carolyn, did you still have a question? I saw you wrote you had a
Yeah,
question.
I was wondering if you had any ideas on how I might ask questions in a stats course in a way that will not really encourage students to use Gen AI to just come up with the answer. I mean, I don't use Gen AI myself at all ever. I did it once after the previous week's talk just to see what it was about because I've read about it in theory, but figured I should have some hands-on knowledge as
Hmm.
well. And I thought, this isn't that useful for me unless I wanted to do my coding for me. But
No,
yeah,
yeah, and it's um the catch 22 with this is we have industry members being like, we want folks to be able to use AI ethically, but then my counter to that is always like, I need you to learn the base skills, and you cannot trust AI to blindly do these things for you. I encourage folks to have a conversation with their students, and I don't know, Carolyn, have I given you my faculty checklist for AI? And I can send this along to Bonnie as well, and she can distribute it. Give me a second here. I like having the conversation with students and setting those expectations. I've had a lot of students ask me like, how do I ask my instructor about using this? And then they're afraid of that judgment and they're afraid of being accused of plagiarism straight out. And so I like to encourage faculty to just have that conversation with their students about like the various tools, things that they can and cannot do, and agreeing on those tools together and use together. We found it best to have that explanation of like, this is why I need you to learn this first before we start using AI. And it's that factor of like, you cannot trust the output from AI, and we need you to be able to learn this and to do this by hand and to check that those answers are correct, because you might go to a workplace and they might be using an AI tool, but again, you can't 100% trust those answers all the time. So it's just kind of, I don't know, building that intrinsic motivation and value. Not a great question, but Carolyn, come talk to me after and we can look at your assignments and brainstorm.
Thanks. Actually, you did give me an idea, so that's
Okay.
helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, learning how and why and not to achieve the output. I've been asked a lot of times where it's like, oh my gosh, prompt engineering, it's like this new profession. And I'm like, it's actually not. It's what I do as a librarian every single day. Um, and it's a little bit more precise into a lot of these um, applications now, but it's still the same principles. You're defining what exactly you want, what kind of output, what keywords you're using. My stipulation has always been to teach this ethics part before I let you run wild with prompt engineering. So, option 2. Yep, asking questions, giving instructions, skill you already have. It's that critical assessment. Um, I also like pointing students towards using AI to brainstorm and even generate those synonyms and keywords for doing their searches for literature review. The number one issue I come across with when I'm teaching those research sessions is students really don't know what the synonyms could possibly be or how to build that search in order to cover all of the synonyms. Um, Carolyn, I've also had a that's actually an excellent point, because I've had a lot of instructors where they're like, Grammarly, ChatGPT can automatically do all this grammar check. And they're like, should I even be grading for grammar now in my essays? And it's like, should you? Is that the most important part now? Or should you be grading more on, did they provide enough evidence? Is that evidence actually concrete? Did they make connections? I've had a lot of assignments where we've changed things now um, to make cognitive connections that aren't quite obvious. So I do a lot of business research classes. One of the assignments in the undergrad comm classes is organizational behavior. You're supposed to take an organizational behavior theory and apply it to a like news article. And I oftentimes recommend news articles where it's like totally irrelevant to organizational theory unless you think about it. So, my favorite example is always looking at like celebrity divorces. So, my last example was like, how does Maslow's hierarchy of needs apply to Tom Brady and Gisele Bündchen's divorce? And when you ask ChatGPT Copilot to make that connection, they're just like, I don't understand what you're talking about, because it doesn't have that higher level abstract thinking where I could force a connection between those two concepts that look like they don't have a connection. So, thinking about different ways to do your assignments that way. Akshi, question.
Hi. So I'm from University of Winnipeg. Great presentation. I happened to download ChatGPT a week ago, and I'm like, oh, it would be interesting to see. And it was amazing presentation. I got to learn about a lot of things that I need to be careful about while I'm using ChatGPT. So thank you.
Yeah.
Do you think all of these AI tools takes data from each other?
Oh,
Like
they
this,
for sure do. Yes.
Okay.
Copilot, Microsoft Copilot is actually like built on the skeleton of ChatGPT. And then what they've done is they've like trained it a little bit differently. They've given it access to web searching, their Bing web search. So, and a lot of those customized applications that you're seeing kind of pop up right now, and even in ChatGPT, if you pay for the premium version, there is they're just like custom GPTs is what they're called, but they're basically they took the base code of ChatGPT and its functionality, and then they customized it and trained it to do a specific function. So it can like there's ones where it like it specializes on like doing resume writing or cover letter writing, and that's where we start getting a lot of those specializations. A lot of the training kind of tools that I mentioned, oh, if I can get back to it, also are freely available on the internet, and it's basically crowdsourced pieces of information and data sets so that lots of programmers can use it to train a lot of their stuff. So it's a lot of it crosses over, yes.
Oh, that's very interesting. I think the point that I was gonna make when the internet happened and everybody was getting their assignments off internet, and then we got to know about the plagiarism, and now we have different tools such as Authenticate, and now
Yeah.
we can find out where exactly is this coming from, and
Yep.
maybe eventually we'll have some particular tool who would be able to pinpoint where is this information particularly coming from.
Mhm.
Did somebody ask ChatGPT about a diet plan for this person, and then somebody wrote off the assignment from that particular thing? I
Yeah.
think that would be super cool eventually. Yeah.
It's really funny because before doing this, because I studied academic integrity, especially during the pandemic, cheating sites like Chegg, Course Hero, those sites were like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? How do we get our assignments off of them? Like, how do we mitigate this? And what's actually happened with ChatGPT, it's bankrupted a lot of those companies. Chegg has like laid off 100 and some employees. They're slowly going down the drain. But it's also kind of like, how do we then mitigate this for students? It has also given faculty an advantage because their assignments and questions and things were always getting posted on Chegg, always getting posted on Course Hero. And now, like, one of my suggestions for faculty has been like, you can create custom case studies in situations for whatever you need in class. And the beauty of that is you can change it year to year, term to term very quickly. You can change the variables, you can change the storyline, and it makes that much more difficult to pass it between students when the answers change every single time. And it and takes a bit of that kind of cognitive work off of you, but then it's also considered you are an expert and you can evaluate that output and modify and change it to your needs. So yeah, it's a constant struggle everywhere. None of these presentations that I do, I ever claim to have a solid answer. I just provide you with, here's the situation, um, figure out what you need from this, and adjust accordingly. So, yeah. Any other questions? I will send all of these things to Bonnie, and Bonnie can send it off to you. If you have further questions, my email address is in these slides. Um, yeah, feel free, contact me.
And also, we've recorded the session, so if there's
Mhm.
something you want to go back to and take another look at, the recording will be up, available when Zoom finishes doing its whatever it does in the background to recordings. I'll send that out, hopefully today.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you for attending, everyone.
Well, and thank you, Anne. This was a wonderful presentation. I think we all learned a lot today. And the biggest lesson for me, I've been playing with Gen AI for quite some time, and the biggest thing is it just changes. So you think you
Constantly.
understand something, and then tomorrow it's completely different.
For sure. Okay, well, thank you, everyone, and talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.